Hello there, my name is Clare and Aidan.
And my name is Aidan McGibbon.
And welcome to the Weather Studio. We are live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. talking all things weather.
That's right. And we've got a topical show this week. We're talking about something that is in the news right now. And actually it's a good news story because it's the daring rescue attempt in Thailand for those little boys in the cave. And the weather's been on our side for once. So we'll be having a look at the rains in Thailand. We'll also have a look at the rains in India, the southwest monsoon, and the current status of that at the moment. And a tropical storm. Tropical Storm Chris, you may have heard about Chris, predicted to become a hurricane and predicted to potentially impact our weather later in the weekend and into the start of next week. How will that affect the UK weather? Will it blow summer away or will it just introduce even more humid air? We'll be taking a look at Chris. But first, well, some tragic weather going on in Japan recently. Some shocking news footage here. Flooding. Devastating flooding.
Absolutely. The death toll continues to rise across the southern portion of Japan. We've seen horrendous amounts of rain through the last week or so. 2 million people have been evacuated from Hiroshima and prefectures further north as well. And the rain, well, it has eased now, but there's always a lag effect, isn't there? The rain comes down and it continues to flow to its lowest point.
It's incredible, devastating scenes here. You can see the widespread flooding and this poor lady here just standing on the last remaining piece of dry land, and a rescue attempt. Boats coming into these neighbourhoods devastated by flooding. Well,
the floodwaters have just continued to rise, but it's really landslides where most people lose their lives. A lot of debris falling from the nearby hills and pushing down towards the lowest point with the force of that water. So some very brave rescue attempts going on across this part of Japan. And it's the worst flooding they've seen for about 35 years, Aidan. So yes, really, the whole nation is in mourning right now due to the fact that this has been an awful event for them. Let's just have a look and see what's happening right now across, well, Asia in particular. Now, this time of year we do see a lot of rain. It's all linked in the bigger picture globally to the intertropical convergence zone where the trade winds of the southeast and northeast converge. And this ITCZ moves north and south depending on when the sun is strongest, and currently it's further north. So we have other sort of local effects which affect how much rainfall there will be across this portion of the world. So for Japan, we've got this almost quasi or semi-stationary front called the Beiyu front, which has produced a lot of rain recently across Japan. And then typically at this time of year, we do see typhoons. More about that in a moment. There's one just lurking here, which we'll be talking about.
So this is Japan here, and this typhoon Maria heading into eastern parts of Asia. And if we move the map around slightly, you can see Thailand. More on that in a moment, and of course India, the southwest.
So this is the southwest monsoon, which moves from around June time, moves northwards, giving pulses of heavy rain right the way through that period after some very, very intense heat. And India and the subcontinent really, really need that rain to allow them to survive during the drier months through autumn and winter time. So yes, a lot to talk about here, but first of all, let me introduce you to one of our global experts. He's a global weather forecaster. Nick Silkstone, please come and join us. And he's going to talk through more the details of what's been going on, first of all in Japan and then Thailand and India. So welcome, Nick.
Here's Japan on the map. You can see the rainfall here. Can you give us the latest on what's expected in the next few days for Japan?
The good news is that the Beiyu front has been displaced to the north of the country. The worst affected prefectures are in the central and southern parts of Japan, and they're going to be out of the woods for the next 7 to 10 days. Very little and very light rainfall across that region.
It was the combination of this front plus a typhoon, not this one, but an earlier one called
Prapiroon,
which pushed northwards and pushed towards the northeast, which gave copious amounts of rain, and it was the combination of both. The land was just saturated and couldn't cope.
That's correct. The typhoon curled around the southern part of Japan, passed between Japan and Korea, moving northeastwards. It drew up very warm, moist, southerly flow off the western Pacific and East China Sea, and then that was engaged by the Beiyu front, and it just produced, absolutely masses of rain. Some places saw in excess of 1 metre. That's 1,000 millimetres of rain. falling over the last week, with many places seeing their records for rainfall broken across that region.
So this is the start of Thursday. This is UK time, and you see H near Japan. So things hopefully.
Yeah.
And this is the Typhoon Maria, which is likely to make landfall through the next 12 hours or so.
It's been a violent typhoon. It is. It's just tracked across some of Japan's southwesternmost islands, extend almost all the way down here towards Taiwan. It will just do it'll graze just the very far north of Taiwan before making landfall across China, weakening as it does so. There's some impacts likely in the likes of sort of Taipei, northern Taiwan, and also eastern China from heavy rainfall in particular.
Right. More rain, yes.
Let's move on to a more positive news story, which is ongoing. The very daring cave rescue, very brave people involved in the cave rescue, and of course those young boys. I understand more and more children are now being rescued, and the rains have been on our side, haven't they?
When the boys first went into the cave, there was accumulations of rainfall in this area, around 20 to 30 millimetres per day, and that's how they got the inundation, the flooding. Thankfully, in July so far at Chiang Rai, there's only been 6 millimetres of precipitation recorded, so the weather's really been on our side to help the rescue attempts, and that's way below average. This region sees around 350 millimetres alone through July on an average year.
Let's put that in perspective relative to how much rainfall we expect across, say, 6 months. It's about the same. So in 1 month, there's a huge amount of rain. So it's been very unusual not to see so much in the last week or so.
We're a third of the way through July now, and if that were to, that pattern what we've had so far were to continue, that would be 18 mils through the month when they normally get 350-ish. So we've had a very, very lucky break in the monsoon across that part of the world that's helped with the rescue effort immensely, no doubt.
Yeah, because initially there were stories about those kids having to stay for several months to wait until the season had finished. So yeah, they have been very, very lucky. Speaking of monsoon seasons, of course, this is the Indian subcontinent, and rains are pulsing, but they are moving up the country, aren't they?
It's been a very variable monsoon so far across India this year. Precipitation has been above what we would normally expect across large swathes of the western part of India, the Western Ghats and the high ground there down towards Sri Lanka. We've also had monsoon depressions or monsoon low pressure systems forming in the trough, which is across this region in central India, that slowly migrate northwestwards with time. That's left two relatively dry areas of India. Very little rain has been found across the southeast of the country, and these areas just south of the Himalayas in the very far northeast, including the northwest of Bangladesh, have seen way below average this year up to this point. So
this is not the most northerly extent of the monsoon. It does push further north over the next 3 or 4 weeks, does it?
The final stage of the monsoon is a northwestwards push up towards the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and that's expected in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But the rains up here are generally much lighter and much more intermittent than they are further south.
Well, they've had such high temperatures across Pakistan through the last month or so, exceeding 50 degrees, and they really look forward to the monsoon rains. Hopefully they'll get some good rain to help them through the autumn and winter months.
Yeah, it brings a fantastic relief to the temperatures, and for Pakistan, I believe a lot of their water supply comes from the big rivers, the Indus, for example, and they get much of that precipitation what falls on the Himalayas and sort of passes down through the country.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
If you don't mind bearing with us for one moment, we've had some questions coming through.
No problem.
Mainly about the UK weather, actually. Callum Turley has asked, are we going to get any thunderstorms soon? Well, actually, we're going to talk a bit more about that later on, a potential change in the UK weather. And that all hinges on the behaviour of tropical storm, perhaps soon to become Hurricane Chris. Now, let me show you where Chris currently is if we play this through. Chris has formed as a tropical storm off the Carolinas, and Chris's position later on Tuesday UK time. And if I turn on the winds and the rainfall, you can see we are expecting perhaps Chris to become a hurricane. Is that right?
It's likely to become a hurricane in the next 6 to 12 hours time.
And you can see it moving north, thankfully staying out of the way of mainland US, but potentially heading towards Canada.
May just clip Nova Scotia. By this point, we expect it to be transitioning to almost an extra tropical.
So it's likely
system.
just to be a Cat 1, is it? We're not expecting anything higher than that?
The output that I've looked at this morning suggests it may reach a Cat 2, sort of Cat 3 borderline, just for a short time the next day or two, but beyond that, evidently weakening as it does its extratropical transition and moves across the Atlantic. No longer a hurricane.
It is pushing our way, isn't it? And so this actually shows the track of it up to around, well, the middle part of the weekend.
So this is the official track from the National Hurricane Centre, and their track forecasts always appear as a cone shape, don't they? Because that highlights the uncertainty. With time, the cone gets wider. So this is later Thursday into Friday, and then the weekend. And like you say, Nick, it's then an extratropical storm because it's left those warm waters behind.
Exactly. All we're often left with is basically the footprint of warm, moist air that the hurricane had is then caught up in the mid-latitude jet stream, and it brings enhanced rainfall, chance of, the warm air is basically some energy for development of storms across the North Atlantic, but it's not a hurricane or a tropical storm when it reaches the UK. If it reaches the UK.
And that's always a big if at this stage. We'll be tackling that question, whether Chris will impact our weather, in a moment. But for now, thank you very much, Nick Siltzer. I know you're very busy today with a lot of global weather going on, so thank you for taking the time to come onto the weather studio.
Cheers.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
So we've had an incredible summer here so far. It's been the lack of rain rather than any flooding that has been the main talking point, and the sunshine and the warm temperatures.
We do need the rain, don't we? That's the thing.
Absolutely.
So in a way, this is going to be very interesting how it progresses. But before that, let's backtrack, shall we?
Let's take a look at summer so far. Now, you've not seen this,
No.
Claire. These are the numbers that stand out for me about the summer so far. So if you've been paying attention to this summer so far, you'll find this easy.
So this is Aidan's big UK summer numbers game, pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
So quite straightforward. There's 6 numbers here. And what do they mean with respect to summer 2018? Let's start with a small one. Number 1.
Number 1. It's a tricky
Could be
one.
anything, actually.
It could be anything,
tricky.
yes.
I'll give you a clue. June was number 1 for...
The warmest June on record, the driest June on record, or the sunniest June on record?
The first one was correct, but only for Wales and Northern Ireland.
Oh,
so it was the warmest June on record for Wales and for Northern Ireland, third warmest for the UK as a whole. Okay. And number 16, this has been something we've been talking about a lot this week.
This is the amount of dry days we've seen so far. Or is it the amount of days where the temperature has exceeded 28 degrees?
Exactly. The number of consecutive days in the UK somewhere has exceeded 28 degrees, or got to and exceeded 28 degrees. Now, the longest consecutive spell of 28 degree plus days prior to this, 19 days, in 2013, which when I heard this, I thought...
I don't remember that.
I remember 2013 being a remarkable summer.
Did it turn wet later? Was that what happened?
I think it must have done, because summers don't necessarily stand out when they are wet later on, do they? You end up thinking it's a disappointing summer if
when
it's
the kids sort of set off on their summer holidays, or they just hang out at home, that's when the rain kicks in.
Well,
the last few weeks of their school days, yes.
This spell was between 6th and 24th of July.
Right, that's about right, because the children break up around the 3rd week of July, so that's pretty typical, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes.
And of course, 1976, 2006, 1997, these are other years that had similar consecutive spells, but they're not been that common in the past. So we've had longer, but not that common. Now, 33.0.
That sounds like, to me, was that a Scottish record?
Not quite.
It was a Welsh record.
Almost. Well, it was the top temperature in the UK this year, and it was in Porthmadog, 28th of June. That was the top temperature. That's the warmest it's been this year in the UK. 33.2.
Well, that's confusing now. That's really sort of set me off, and I'm a bit hazy about why that number's there. You did that to confuse me, didn't you?
You used your last answer. Scottish.
Okay. Scottish.
It's... Let me just... Actually, I'm not putting up the answers here, am I?
Okay,
That's
hot temp.
That's not great. It's
not temp. I like what you've done. That's alliteration, isn't it?
Hottest temp. That was recorded on the same day in Motherwell, and you mentioned this in the weather studio last week. It was being verified, and the Met Office operates a highly strict verification process of all these temperatures, and it was found that that was not an accurate temperature because there was evidence of a parked vehicle near the thermometer. So we do make sure we have a rigorous verification process. We make sure that these temperatures are accurate representations. So that was discounted. Now, number 50.
50 has to be dry days because obviously we're parched here. You're smiling.
No.
No, you love this, don't you? 50. So 50 is days or hours or minutes.
50 is the number of grass pollen grains in a cubic metre that would be defined as high pollen. And pollen was a big talking point earlier on in June. Of course, the grass is now parched, which leads me on to 800. Just a hint there.
800, I don't know.
You've given up, haven't you?
Iron Age.
800 BC was the start of the Iron Age, and the Iron Age went on to 43 AD, and Iron Age is significant because of this. The grass is now so parched that there are Iron Age settlements like this one. This was taken by the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historic Monuments of Wales. This is a medieval castle ground at Castell Clyn Gwynai at Tregaron in Ceredigion. And perfect conditions for archaeological aerial photography. The Royal Commission have been taking these photos, grass has dried out, and they've been taking the opportunity to take a look at these monuments that have suddenly surfaced beneath the
And there's quite a lot of photos like that.
There are, yeah.
On social media, they seem to be popping up all over the place, don't they?
On the website of the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historic Monuments of
to be
Wales.
A balloonist and up in the air and seeing the
fascinating. It'd be like going to see the NASCAR lines or something
like
that.
But just with that cool air, because it's been quite oppressive here, hasn't it? It's been really, really hot. But
we need the rain.
We do need the rain, and also I think we need some comfortable nights. That did happen across some parts last night.
More so tonight.
Yeah, good news. Good news.
Perhaps only a temporary relief because the temperatures are warming up over the next few days. It's about to become hot again at the weekend in some places. But this could throw a spanner in the works, or at least be a fly in the ointment of the bigger...
I know where you're going. I know where you're going. Carry on.
We talked about Hurricane Chris, and you can see the cone getting wider. That highlights the uncertainty into the weekend of Chris's position, and that is important because then the uncertainty increases even further. Now, this is when we run a computer model several times, and we look at the outcome, changing the initial conditions of that computer model. So the UK is here. We change the initial conditions very slightly, and it has a huge impact on the end result. And you can see the different paths that are projected from Chris. Now, hurricanes, it's not unusual for hurricanes to move into the North Atlantic, get swept up by the jet stream, and the remnants to be carried towards the UK. But they can be more difficult to forecast than normal areas of low pressure, and that's because they're actually quite small and they have a huge amount of energy concentrated in that small space. And pinpointing exactly where that energy will enter the jet stream, well, that can end up with very different answers when you put it into computer models. So, as you can see, here's the UK, the track of Chris by the start of next week. Well, there are lots of solutions. But, regardless of which track Chris takes, well, the weather, there are some common themes in the weather forecast for next week, and the main themes emerging are that it's more likely to be cyclonic than anticyclonic, so low pressure is more likely to be closer to us than it's been recently, and the general airflow is likely to be coming in from the southwest, so that means that eastern areas will still be quite warm. It could bring up quite a lot of humid air, and it could lead to some rain for some areas or some thunderstorms. So it's way too early to tell and to give specifics for next week. But there are signs of a different flavour to the UK weather, and Chris may be involved somewhere at some point. We will, of course, be updating the forecast over the next few days. We've got the 10-day trend to come tomorrow on Wednesday, and that, of course, goes out on our YouTube channel, goes out on our Facebook account as well. So these are all the ways that you can follow us on social media.
On our Met Office YouTube channel, there's a really interesting film about monsoons, actually, which Aidan and I recorded last year. And it talks about the mechanism behind the southwest monsoon across India and Pakistan and why it happens. And obviously, we update you every day, numerous times a day, on our Twitter account. And in fact, if you want to keep an eye on hurricane to be, then hurricane Chris, Met Office Storms account will give you some really good details on that, including Typhoon Maria across the Pacific as well.
So there have been a few more questions coming in.
Oh,
We'll
brilliant.
squeeze a couple in before we finish. One question here, has that Porthmadog temp been verified? Yes, that has been verified. So that's the UK's hottest temperature so far this year. Another question here. Why has it been dry for so long, asks Craig Wood. There was no rain where I live in June. Familiar story, I suspect, for a lot of places. Well, we've had high pressure sat over the UK for a long time. The jet stream's been diverted well to the north, and Iceland has had a terrible summer because that's where all the low pressure systems have been going. And that's why it's been dry for so long.
The weather's been really blocked, hasn't it? And so, there's been parts of Europe as well as Iceland where they've seen a lot of rain, but we've been stuck in the middle with the heat building, homegrown heat building, and dry on drier, and that's why we've seen such high temperatures. And in fact, this weekend, temperatures look like they are going to soar across some parts of the UK again.
That's right. And Gaza, Sweden says, I see storms forecast for East Sweden on Sunday. It's possible. Thunderstorms quite common across parts of East Sweden in the summer months, and so yes, I've not looked at Sweden, to be honest, but thunderstorms also possible in parts of the UK as we end the working week, go into the weekend, and next week, like I say, a more cyclonic flavour, a more low pressure closer to the UK into next week, so that does always throw up the threat of thunderstorms in the UK. As a threat, some places, of course, will be grateful for some rain. But yeah, I think that is all we've got for you today. We will be back same time next week on YouTube. This has been The Weather Studio. I've been Aidan McGivern.
And I'm Clare and Aidan. Have a lovely day.
Bye-bye.